Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Jeff Halley, Senior Market Analyst, Asia Pacific at OANDA. Jeff, as always, good to have you back on the show.
Thanks very much, mate. Good to have a week off, but also great to be back.
Now, Jeff, before we get your insights, we're going to take a look at cryptocurrencies and also take a look at how markets in the region are performing. Now, we're going to start with Bitcoin. It's at 32,844. It's down 9.4%. Ethereum is at 2,501. It's down 9.65%. Now, taking a look at how regional markets are performing, we've got the SGX, which is at 3,167.03. It's down 0.28%. Bursa Malaysia is at 1,586.08. It's up 0.48%. The Nikkei is at 28,985.99. It's down 0.11%. The Shanghai Composite is down 0.51% at 3,581. The Hang Seng is at 28,685.5. It's down 0.35%. The ASX 200 is at 7,295.5. It's up 0.17%. And rounding off the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is pretty much flat at 3,252.02. Jeff, very mixed markets across the region. What's happening? Tell us.
Well, it was a mixed night overnight as well. And I think really what's happened is the market's being left to its own devices within individual countries. And so, for example, I believe China's stocks are down today because of nerves about the import numbers yesterday. We saw import prices rising dramatically, which cut the trade surplus. The question being, if all these commodity prices and inputs are rising, will Chinese producers be able to pass those price increases on to clients, to customers for the finished products? Jury's out on that, but I think there's some nerves about that. There's some nerves about copper prices as well. Depending on who you speak to, we're either going to run out of copper or the Chinese are going to stop buying copper. I think generally this, in an environment where there's not a lot of international news to give us a thematic view, that investors are erring to the side of caution. We're seeing that across Asia as well. Early gains in the Nikkei are being pared back, and we're seeing pretty much most of Asia just trading around each side of unchanged. Very much, I think, a wait-and-see market ahead of US inflation numbers later this week.
Yeah, and speaking of Nikkei, the Nikkei's bounce initially was because the government data released this morning showed that the economy only shrank by 3.9% in the first quarter. Now, that's an improvement on consensus of about 5.1 expected contraction. So I think that's probably part of the reason why it had a little bump and then kind of retraced its steps.
Yeah, and like this data is from Q1, so it's already sort of 2.5 months old. What we're seeing since then, of course, is the increase in COVID-19 cases there and the government restrictions pretty much across Japan that have been extended. It looks increasingly likely that the Tokyo Olympics may not go ahead in the form that we're expecting as well. This is all going to weigh on the data in the second quarter of this year for Japan, and I think that is why that rally quickly ran out of steam.
Now, Jeff, I've got to ask you about Bitcoin. It's had a pullback recently, and your commentary this morning suggests that you expect a significant further downside risk. Why is that?
I look like a guru today, don't I? But I can assure everybody watching, it was just accidental. Look, I've been watching a technical formation on Bitcoin for the last couple of weeks. It's a symmetrical triangle, and it's a bearish symmetrical triangle. And the bottom of that was $35,000, and that broke overnight. So the target for me is $22,000. It's another $13,000 per Bitcoin away.
Wow.
Bitcoin has continued falling this morning, but I believe that some of it might be to do with this news that the FBI managed to seize back some of those Bitcoins that were paid as a ransom for the Colonial Pipeline attack. Now, it's not so much the FBI itself, it's the fact that maybe Bitcoin is not as free of government interference or not as untraceable as the Bitcoin or the crypto community think it is. And I suspect that may be behind some of the selling as well. If Bitcoin is supposed to be anonymous and free of government interference, hence its use of the proceeds of crime all the time. Yep. And if it's not, then perhaps the case for Bitcoin has lost some of its gloss. And I think that could be what's part of what's going on. Obviously, there'll be liquidity issues. I do believe that if we fall below 30,000, though, we'll have another capitulation sell-off, because that will put every long position that was put on since the 1st of January underwater.
Now, Jeff, I've got to ask you about Wall Street here. We've had a mixed session overnight. S&P 500 was 0.08 lower. NASDAQ rose by 0.49%. Dow Jones fell by 0.37%. Now, clearly, Wall Street is not worried about the G7 tax agreement and its impact on big tech. But what are the moving parts that are actually worrying Wall Street the most?
I think the big worry is inflation. Is it here? Is it not? Is it transitory, or is it sticky inflation? Nobody really knows this answer yet. And we're getting very mixed messages from the data, particularly from the US. On one hand,
mixed messages also from Janet Yellen and the Fed Chairman Powell.
Yeah, look, and I actually agree with Ms. Yellen. I mean, I could spend hours talking about quantitative easing and how I think it's all gone on too long, and the world needs to get back to the real world and the efficient allocation of capital. We only have a few minutes, but yep. She is correct in that it would be the sign of a recovering economy if rates rose. That was pretty much ignored by markets yesterday. I think it's this ongoing, is it here, is it not inflation question. And things like the non-farm payrolls just aren't giving us that answer, because they're undershooting while CPI prints are rising higher. Yep. And then you look at the small business surveys, they can't find enough workers and wages are moving higher. There's so many moving parts here and there's no clear answer. When you look at the research, I mean, Deutsche Bank, for example, put out an inflationary Armageddon research note today. But when you look at other major players in the market, they're much more sanguine about inflation prospects. Same thing in some of the more famous hedge fund community. The fact is, we just don't know yet, but this is what is causing the nerves in the market, because we don't have a clear picture.
And how about market concerns closer to home in Asia? What are our regional economies and markets worried about?
We've got China inflation as well on Wednesday. Now, that'll be interesting if the number comes out. And I think I had around 1.5% for the CPI for May for year on year. Look, if that number comes up much higher than expected, after we've seen that trade balance get eroded by higher import prices, there's nerves about the peak of the China recovery. That could be a bit of a negative event for China and for Asian markets as a whole. We could see more selling of local equities, and perhaps, and we're also seeing that the PBOC is signaling that the strength in the Chinese yuan has probably gone far enough for now as well. They've been sending a few subtle messages there. So I do believe that this China CPI number on Wednesday will be key for Asia, because obviously where China goes, so does the rest of Asia these days.
Now, for the rest of the week, what are key events and data points to watch out for?
Yeah, it's a bit of a quiet week after the frenzy of last week, but the highlight will be the US CPI numbers that we've got coming out. We've got US trade balance tonight. I don't think that'll be, and the JOLTS job openings, I don't think they'll be market moving. Everybody's concentrating on this inflation number. But interestingly, we actually do have inflation prints from all across the world this week. And I think we're going to have a much better picture of where we stand inflation-wise globally by the end of the week. But it's certainly that number on a relatively tier 2 week that the market is concentrating on.
Now, Jeff, thanks for taking the time to speak to us.
Always a pleasure, mate. Have a great week ahead.
Thank you. Now, we've been speaking to Jeff Halley, Senior Market Analyst, Asia Pacific at OANDA, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Please check out our Facebook and LinkedIn sites, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. Thanks a lot for tuning in.